Hello and welcome to the Ecova webinar, Internet of Things, a Shift in Power. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Aisha and I will be helping with the presentation. Though you won't be able to speak during our time, we will have a live Q&A session following our presentation, so send in your questions as they come up and I will ask them of our host. Just click on the orange arrow to open up the question window if needed. We will be sending out a link to the recording and a copy of today's presentation by tomorrow, so please check your inbox for that and feel free to pass it along. If you have any other feedback for us, you can let us know through the brief 5-question survey you will be taken to following the webinar. I would now like to introduce you to your host for today, Jamie Daubenspeck, Director of Facility Technology with Ecova. Jamie Daubenspeck is Ecova's expert of anything relating to the Internet of Things, including meter interval data, trend and telemetry data, and big data and advanced analytics. He is also the product manager over Ecova's continuous monitoring and metering solutions, helping our commercial clients drive costs out of their operations by detecting and resolving site-level issues before they become expensive problems. Jamie has more than 15 years of experience in monitoring, telemetry data, and advanced analytics. He graduated from the University of Washington with a bachelor's degree in history and political science, and has also taught as an adjunct professor at Clark College. With those introductions, Jamie, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Aisha, and thanks to everyone on the line who's able to attend today. Today's webinar, we're going to cover the ever-changing landscape of the IoT, where virtually anything imaginable and technology are intersecting. Some of the topics we'll dig into are, what is the IoT? What does this mean for your facilities? And what should we keep an eye out for? What is the Internet of Things, or IoT as it's commonly referred to? But simply, it's devices, vehicles, buildings, and other things embedded with electronics, software, and sensors, which in turn are enabled by network connectivity that allows these objects to collect and exchange data. 10, even 5 years ago, many of these things were not quote-unquote smart. Most devices could not collect data, and for those that could, you typically had a difficult time gathering the data. In the event that you were able to overcome those hurdles, you're now faced with, where do I store the data and what do I do with it? As technology becomes more mature, two things historically happen. Price and size goes down. For example, take just one component of a PC, a personal computer, the hard drive. Over the years, we measured capacity in megabytes, then gigabytes, and now terabytes. The size has come down too, from a 3.5-inch spinning drive to today's super small solid-state storage. I think we're all familiar with the cost of technology as it matures. The bottom line is you get more for your money. So naturally, as technology becomes smaller, more affordable, and more powerful, designers and product managers began to explore how to incorporate that into their products to make them smarter. There are several examples we see in our everyday lives. Wearables like the Apple Watch, Fitbit, and others. I personally know at least a half-dozen people who got one of those as a gift this last holiday season. These devices are able to track an ever-increasing volume and variety of data. For example, from your health, how much you exercised yesterday, to how well you slept last night. Footwear and apparel companies like Nike, Adidas, and others, they're all integrating technology into their products to stay competitive. It's not a stretch to think that the next generation of athletes will be dependent on these devices to measure and improve their performance. Google Glass, another great example of technology that, while not widely adopted, gave us a glimpse of what we can expect in the future. You might have also heard of their car. It can drive itself. Over the last few years, we are beginning to see the IoT in our homes. The Nest thermostat, Philips Hue light bulbs, the Amazon Echo, and smart TVs, to name a few. With a simple voice command, I could order a pizza, turn on my TV, go to Netflix, and dim the lights and watch a movie. These devices collectively are creating smart buildings, smart transportation, and in general, a smarter world. So we've established today that we have technology embedded into virtually every aspect of our lives. And with that comes the ability to track and monitor an unprecedented amount of things, all of which generates what we call, quote unquote, big data. It's a term you may have heard before. It describes a large volume of data that are typically so large and complex that traditional data systems are inadequate for handling it. When we talk about big data, we inevitably talk about the 3 V's: volume, velocity, and variety. Volume. Data comes from a variety of sources like the devices we mentioned earlier. Each, really when considered individually, may not generate much data, but when considered collectively, they certainly do. Especially when we're talking about multiple sites with different assets all talking and sending data. Next, velocity. Data streams in at an unprecedented speed and must be dealt with in a timely manner. These devices are driving the need to deal with streams of data in near real time. And the last one, variety. Data comes in all types of format, from structured, numeric data in traditional databases to unstructured data like text, email, video, audio, etc. But at the end of the day, it's not the amount of data that's really important. What really matters is what you do with the data. Big data can be analyzed for insights that lead to all sorts of new and innovative uses. We're seeing a lot of companies leveraging big data to enhance their customer experience. For example, Netflix. They're able to determine what movies you might like based on what you've watched previously. Their recommendation algorithm factors in not only that, but several other data points like the time of day, where you live, and the viewing habits of millions of other viewers like you. Amazon, another great example of a company who's integrated analytics into their core business. Their prediction algorithm is able to determine that people who buy product A are also likely to buy product B. So the underlying question is not if we can leverage the IoT to reduce our energy consumption, it's a question of when and how. Let's take a look at some projections from Gartner and Business Insider. At the end of 2015, there were 5 billion devices that made up the Internet of Things. They're projecting over the next 5 years that number will roughly quadruple to 21 billion. That translates to 5.5 million devices being connected every day. 5.5 million. Also means that we're projected to spend $6 trillion on IoT solutions, the vast majority of which will be by business. Why so much growth? It's mainly due to a few reasons. Expanded internet connectivity. It's difficult today to find a place where you're not connected. Go really any corner of the earth and it seems like you can get a cell phone connection, internet connection, Wi-Fi. It's almost ubiquitous. The increase in mobile technology and application. Most of us have a laptop computer, smartphone, smartwatch, possibly a tablet. And finally, most importantly, low-cost sensors and controls. The future is now. Smart technology and the Internet of Things are not just for industrial companies and large commercial buildings. Traditionally, implementing smart building systems has been expensive. You could expect to start at about $10,000 and go up from there. The impact was that price have limited their applicabilities to only those facilities that are typically over 50,000 square feet and above. This is mainly because smaller facilities just didn't have the utility spend to justify the investment. So what's changed? We've been seeing trends where the home automation market is spilling over into commercial with low-cost hardware and cloud-based services. Both are things that, one, your finance team is going to like and your IT team is going to like. Systems that provide for web-enabled automation of HVAC, lighting, and plug loads are now common. The ability to centrally manage a portfolio of sites and implement corporate standards is in reach of almost anyone. And most important, again, the prices are coming down to the point that even the smallest facilities are able to justify the investment. At Ecova, we have a number of clients whose average facility size is under 5,000 square feet. We've done pilots with several of these clients and implemented smart building systems where they've realized a payback or ROI of less than 24 months. One client in particular achieved a 29% reduction in just energy consumption during their pilot. With returns like that, it's clear to see how Gartner is predicting such massive growth over the coming years. So what does this mean for you? Companies are looking to leverage the Internet of Things in many ways, expand into new markets, develop new products, increase productivity. At Ecova, obviously our intent is to help you reduce your operating costs. We can do this in a couple of ways, making your maintenance effort more effective and helping you to manage your energy better. Smart buildings and the IoT provide you with a whole new level of operational insight into your facilities. It allows you to predict and optimize your facilities and the assets inside. For example, we can use sensor data to predict an asset's failure and extend its life. Studies have shown that proactive maintenance can reduce costs by as much as 40% while cutting unplanned downtime in half. How are we using the IoT to do this? Put simply, it's big data coupled with sophisticated machine learning algorithms that are able to find correlations that humans never would have been able to. At Ecova, we have one client that has about 1,200 facilities. Every day we get roughly 5 million data points from these various locations. Over the course of a year, that equals about 1.8 billion data points. So much that it's much more than you'd expect any individual to be able to make sense of, let alone do anything with. So I know most of you are thinking, okay, so what? I've got a bunch of data. I want to know what you do with it. How do you get value out of it? The process of making sense of all that data and gaining insight looks something like this. You've got teams of data scientists and domain experts, people who know HVAC, refrigeration, various assets in your facility. They work together and use the big data sets along with an advanced machine learning analytic platform to build algorithms that find patterns and detect patterns in the data. It's an iterative process that ultimately yields a model that is able to predict with a high degree of accuracy when an asset might fail, for instance. The more data you have, the more you can train the model and then increase its accuracy. So it's a very iterative process working with the data and folks who have PhDs in mathematics or computer science. The end result, we have a handful of data points that are able to tell us with a high degree of probability that in the next 6 months, a given asset is going to fail based on the data. With that knowledge, we can mitigate the issue and preempt failure, taking what might have been a $5,000 emergency failure and is now instead of $50 planned maintenance event. Another example where we can use the IoT to optimize our operations is where we would look to potentially shift peak demand or shift peak hours and avoid demand charges. In certain markets, it makes sense to, in certain markets, it makes up a sizable portion of your monthly bill, demand charges. Being able to have insight and then take action in real time allows you to curtail those costs. Having the ability to alarm when peak thresholds or targets are projected to be exceeded, we can do that today. We can do this in part by using telemetry data or meter interval data in real time to predict peaks and then take action in advance of the consumption. Traditional strategies to reduce the consumption have been to turn off an asset in areas that are less critical or try and predict the day ahead and shut off certain machines. For companies where that's not an option, we're seeing the coupling of new technologies like solar and battery being brought together to have the same effect on demand without having to power down equipment. So it's that DER play we're seeing out in particularly, again, areas where there's high peak. The final example I want to talk about is condition-based maintenance and intelligent dispatch. Imagine interconnected systems where your control system is integrated with your maintenance system and your assets are intelligent enough to self-diagnose and dispatch. We're seeing clients today leverage alarm and telemetry data from HVAC systems to do just that. An alarm is generated by an asset at the site and is processed using a centralized workflow engine. Based on the alarm type and associated telemetry data, supplier, temp, returner, temp, other various data points we might be able to get access to, we're able to identify the issue and intelligently dispatch the right technician to the site with the correct parts to resolve the issue. The result is problems are getting fixed the first time, which then saves you money in the process. At this point, I'd like to take a quick poll on how you're planning to or are currently using the Internet of Things to benefit your organization. Reduce utility spend, reduce maintenance spend, avoid unplanned equipment failures, predict forecast consumption. We'll give you guys another maybe 30, 60 seconds here to get results in. Okay, well, an overwhelming majority of you said reduce utility spend and followed up by avoid unplanned equipment failures. And those are two great use cases for how to leverage the IoT to benefit your organization. So looking ahead, what should we keep an eye out for? The first one we'll start off with is integration and data acquisition. Most organizations will typically have multiple flavors of IoT devices in their portfolio. Very few organizations are homogeneous and have the same equipment in every facility standardized across their portfolio. The challenge really is, how do I get data from all these systems into one place? The questions you need to ask, are your systems proprietary or open? What protocols do they use? The unfortunate reality is that there's no universal standard for big data and data acquisition. That being said, we've seen a trend towards open protocols and web services for cloud-based platforms. That streamlines the process of getting all the data in one place and alleviates the big pain point. Definitely something to keep in mind when evaluating devices as you're adding equipment into your facilities. The next one, platforms. The growing importance of platforms is essential in making the most of IoT investments. Having one place to house, model, and analyze the data is key. Are you planning on sharing the data with partners or third-party providers? That's going to drive your decision to host it in the cloud or on-premise. What features do you need? Real-time data streams, workflow, alerting, mobile abilities? We're starting to see open platforms that can provide command and control capabilities on a wide array of devices. Imagine an app that allowed you to control all your devices, regardless of vendors, thermostats, lighting, etc. And so when considering platforms, understanding what your needs are, trying to forecast what you're going to need in the future, things to keep an eye out for. Analytics. Machine learning. Ever hear of it? It's back. Machine learning systems are now able to do what most humans can't. You might have heard of IBM's Watson. A few years ago, it competed successfully on Jeopardy. Google's DeepMind became the first computer program ever to beat a professional player at the game of Go earlier this month. Other companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and GE are all aggressively investing in machine learning analytics. Why is this important? Your analytics engine is the tool that's going to allow you to make sense of the data and gain insight into your facilities. It's where your algorithms and models will live and where the value gets created. The next one I want to talk about is people. With all this talk of technology, it's very easy to overlook the fact that we need people to make it all happen. Without data scientists and domain experts, these algorithms and models would never be built or trained or really rolled out in our organizations. The last one I want to talk about is security. The questions you need to ask are, how sensitive is your data? Do the insights give you a competitive advantage? For instance, if you could reduce your energy and maintenance spend by 10 or 20%, is that a differentiator for you in the marketplace? Those are the questions you'll have to answer for yourself because each company will view these differently. Before investing in the Internet of Things, it's essential to have a strategy. So what is your strategy? What's motivating you? When done right, it's about using technology to be smarter, not sacrificing comfort or convenience. The questions I would ask are, what pain points are you trying to alleviate? Is it unplanned asset failures and downtime? Is it unpredictable spend month over month? Is it targets or goals you're trying to hit? We've seen a lot of organizations establish corporate-wide reduction targets for energy or carbon. Most people could relate to budget cutbacks, year-over-year reduction in spend. So ask yourself, what's your motivation, and how can the Internet of Things, what you're going to implement in your facilities, help to alleviate those? Understand the motivation first will help you focus on what you need to do and what that effort looks like. We recommend that organizations pilot new technologies to prove the value instead of just going with a full board rollout. Pilots are a great way to start small, get stakeholder buy-in, and then roll it out more broadly. Each organization or industry are going to have different opportunities. You may choose to try 2 or 3 before finding the right thing that works for you and your organization. Measurement, I can't stress this enough. Data-driven decision-making. Making smarter decisions based on data and analytics is what this is all about. I find that there are a lot of people who are afraid or intimidated by technology. Don't let that stand in the way and risk your organization getting left behind. Educate yourself. Asking questions of colleagues, competitors, and vendors, all great ways of getting up to speed. Hire a consultant to help you navigate the options and find out what works for you. So in summary, the Internet of Things is here to stay. Technology will continue to be a part of our everyday lives. We're expecting huge growth over the next several years and huge investment, largely driven by business. With big data and analytics layering on top of the Internet of Things and all this technology we're implementing, we can drive improvements and reduce costs in our operations. Finally, be deliberate and have a plan. Don't be afraid or overwhelmed by the technology, but also don't go crazy. Have a plan that works for you. Aisha, I'll hand it back over to you now.
Thanks, Jamie. Please check out our website under Events to register for our upcoming webinars. As I mentioned earlier, I will be sending out a link to the recording and a copy of today's presentation by tomorrow. And if you're getting too many emails from us, just let us know through the post-webinar survey. All right, we will now begin the Q&A session. Please type your questions in the space provided on your GoToWebinar toolbar and hit send. Don't forget, if your toolbar is minimized, click on the orange button with the arrow to maximize the window. All right, our first question comes from Ray. Ray wants to know, Ecova and Engie have invested in several companies like Retroefficiency, Trove, and AMG over the last 12 months. How do they plan to the IoT?
Yeah, great question. We have invested in a number of different companies, and very deliberately so, for the reasons we discussed here in this webinar. Our investment in Trove is really around machine learning and mining for those opportunities in those large data sets that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do as just an individual. They've got a very strong machine learning platform, and we're in the process of basically gaining some insights into our clients' facilities, leveraging this massive amount of telemetry data that we're sitting on. And it's not only just the Internet of Things data that we're bringing into the equation, but we're also bringing in, where relevant and applicable, maintenance data, weather-related data. We can bring in point-of-sale data or any other data that may drive consumption or maintenance at your facilities, and layer that all together to then really gain some insights and find those correlations, right, to predict and optimize. The retroefficiency acquisition, again, kind of ties into that. It's a advanced model that allows us to predict and optimize facilities and identify those opportunities for improvement, or those areas where we think we can get efficiencies. So look for more, at least from us, acquisitions and investments in companies that have machine learning technologies, advanced analytics capabilities. We really see that as the future.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Rachel. Rachel says, my IT department is very restrictive in regards to what we are allowed to install and connect to our corporate network. How do other companies get past these restrictions?
Yeah, another good question. Every organization is a little bit different. And again, IT is typically one of the main stakeholders anytime you're talking about putting something on a network, especially a corporate network. There's some best practices that are widely accepted throughout any industry. One would be, for instance, have your network traffic segregated. If you've got a point-of-sale system or financial systems, those should be segregated away from your building automation and control systems, lighting systems, things of that nature. Typically, you want to secure and lock down those devices at the site so they're only able to communicate between certain things over certain protocols. So where you've got your platform, you want to make sure that that communication is secured. And in those cases where it's just not an option to have it on the corporate network, we've worked with clients to do things like establish, let's say, a parallel network. We've done cellular, for instance, and again, the prices and just in general operational cost of implementing some of these new technologies has really come down and made it affordable. So there's always a solution, but you definitely want to get the key stakeholders, IT being one, involved in it early.
Thank you. Our next question is from Aran. How can IoT be used to capture the real-time crop data?
Could you say that last part, the real-time?
How can IoT be used to capture real-time crop data?
I think it's going to depend on the implementation and what the devices are we're talking about. But in general, real-time streaming of data is, it's a challenge, right? Especially if it's coming in from multiple sites and landing the data, storing the data, and then actually in real time analyzing the data. We've seen a number of platforms out there. So, I mean, you've got the data acquisition piece, you've got the IoT out in the field, you've got data streaming in. This is really where the platform, and I mentioned this in one of the earlier slides, is key, right? Are your needs with real-time data. If you look at companies like Amazon, Microsoft, they've got fairly robust cloud-based platforms, and that might be a good option for some folks. Microsoft Azure or AWS with Amazon, and they've recently rolled out a number of analytics tools, packages around alerting, and a lot of functionality. So I might look at some of those as options. If you need something on-premise, kind of on your network behind your firewall, you could look at doing something like a Hadoop implementation internally and then build out a lot of that. It just depends on your organization and what your tolerance is for some of that.
Thanks, Jamie. All right, we are now closing the Q&A session, but if you have any other questions, you can just let us know through the survey. This concludes our presentation, and thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to having you on future webinars. Jamie, thanks again for your partnership. You did a great job, and we will see everyone next time.